in or out. However, there are benefits to being in a contract. Let me just get this thing off on my screen here now that it's reminding me that we're recording. The first is civilian oversight through the Lambton Group Police Services Board. Those meetings are open to the public anytime, although we very seldom have public attend. And the PSB has open discussions about their concerns in the county, and we hear from the representatives of the communities about that, and they hear our concerns from the policing side as well. The board is going to be changing, and I'm not sure exactly what that's going to look like. We've been left outside of that process. The new board's supposed to be in place this month or next, and I guess I'm waiting to see what happens at the next meeting to see who is involved and how things are going to go. One of the second benefits of being in a contract is the municipality has access to the detachment enhancements and grant funding. We receive grant funding for ride checks for our MHART team involving the mental health nurse. And we have a new grant that's coming up for sexual assault diversion for young offenders. So if you're outside the contract option, it removes civilian oversight and the access to those grant fundings. I'm told that even though the Police Services Board is changing, the billing model is going to stay the same with the base charge and additional charges on calls for service. And I know you may have some specific issues that you'd like to raise with me. Hopefully a little bit later on, I can adequately address them without researching specific incidents. Overall, Lambton has experienced a very busy time in the last period since we've met. The county itself has been busy with several homicides. Grand Bend has been a problem that draws on our resources. Many of you will remember the old days when it was really busy and then they pared us back and things were quiet for a little bit, but we've seen a renewed swell in the summer population of Grand Bend and Lambton Shores. And I was surprised that with COVID going on, it's actually larger. There seems to be people that are looking for opportunities to get out and recreate and be free of the bonds of COVID, so to speak. Summer population influx in that area is not a new concept, and traditionally we saw a draw from London and Kitchener-Waterloo area. But in 2020 and 2021, the summer population attending Grand Bend saw people from those areas, but also travelers from Toronto, Hamilton, Ancaster, Burlington, Niagara Falls, and Windsor. With a more diverse population increase, Lambton Detachment and Lambton Shores bylaw reported greater violence and an upsurge in calls for service. Our policing calls for service were elevated, showing an escalation of serious assaults and weapons offenses. Offenders ranging from locals to transients to street gang members from the GTA, Golden Horseshoe, Kitchener, Windsor areas. And this diversity brings conflicts and prejudices from their home location to Lambton County. There continues to be a disturbing trend of violence in the area, both toward the public and the police. Our officers have experienced swarming by the public in trying to effect an arrest. We've had crowds come to our detachment in Grand Bend in an attempt to liberate their friends who were our prisoners. Fortunately, when they're kicking at the steel door, it doesn't take much equipment to get people from the outside to the cells, so they get to stay. This area is seeing a steady incline in calls for service over the past 5 years, increasing 10% per year in Grand Bend in particular. A lot of calls for a small village. But we've made a proposal to West Region Command, waiting for their response to have sufficient bodies to address these concerns. But when I look at the calls for service trends in Petrolia, I'm glad to report that things are stable in your municipality. Over the past 2 years, occurrences have pretty much remained consistent. The onset of the pandemic in 2020 may have skewed the normal number of calls for service, and it may have had a direct impact on the public behavior and police action. Young people are staying at home or out of a job, may be a reason for an increase in property crime and possibly a reduction in collisions and impairs. On the other hand, we're able to do more property checks and rides, so if the calls for service are down a little bit, we are more able to do more proactive work and be more visible. which I've found to be helpful. The Mental Health Act, an attempt or threat of suicide calls for service. Those calls are up incredibly, and I think that we'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes when we talk about the opiate crisis. I think they're kind of linked. But thanks to the MHART team, or the team that's funded through the provincial grant, emergency department admissions have increased. That means people are getting the help that they need, and fewer persons are being released. We have some increased numbers in 2020 that may be reflective of the effects of the pandemic, as can be seen in some numbers that we'll look at. Before commencing the MHART program in 2019, admission times at Blue Water Health for mental health patients were averaging 7 hours for our members to sit with a person that needed to be assessed. But with the nurse in place, we can be out in 20 minutes or less. We're right around an average of an hour 20, an hour 30. But we've actually had guys clearing within 20 minutes of being. Mental Health Act calls are very prevalent and increasing in all of our communities, and Petrolia is not immune. And I'm not sure, I know we talked a little bit about this at one of your previous meetings, and I had somebody in the audience that didn't like it, but there are studies that have shown that usage of cannabis, specifically by young people, may cause the development of schizophrenia and mental illness. There's many pressures in life, and these pressures, including the pandemic, may spark usage of these substances. Usage of marijuana and opiates may contribute to the greatest increase in our occurrence types, which are mental health calls. We have a state of emergency been declared on Walpole Island because of their opiate use epidemic and the overdoses and deaths that they're experiencing in their community. And we've seen that there's an organized crime presence that is, I think, is in the county that is linked to that, to the trafficking issues. The opiate problem and its related mental health issues, while it's prevalent on Walpole, is evident in the rest of the county. And I think that if organized crime has the ability to have a foothold in the community of Lambton County, I think it affects all of the municipalities contained within them. But the MHART team has certainly been instrumental in helping us manage individuals involved in these calls and reduce wait time for patients as required, as I've said. We're continuing with enforcement actions in Walpole and in the county as well to try and combat the opiate and black market cannabis, because I think that black market cannabis shops that are being fueled obviously by the black market are receiving a product. Black market is out to make money. Whatever product they can move through a site, they will make more money, and that's what they're about. So we haven't had a whole lot of success in grabbing opiates or other substances from cannabis shops, but we are being live to that. Back to the MHART program for just a second. We have 2 RN clinicians, registered nurse clinicians, and our long-term goal is to gain 2 more. So we have 24/7 coverage for this program. And this requires further grant money. And I'm also told the OPP is considering hiring our own permanent staff to fill these positions due to the success teams like this one have had. And although I don't have a time frame on that, and it seems to be discussions, but I haven't seen anything in paper. We've seen mischiefs, thefts, and related occurrences being problematic in Petrolia, and many of these occurrences are related to mental health and substance abuse issues. I think we spoke about this last time I was here, that those with mental health issues often linked to substance abuse, be it opiates or alcohol, do not hold a job to finance their addictions or their life, so they steal. But unfortunately, stolen property is only worth 10% of retail value, which results in a lot of thieving to finance a criminal life. We had 11 B&Es reported in Petrolia in 2021. And unfortunately, the fire department was victimized on several occasions. Once a target with good stuff to be stolen has been identified and the offenders believe they can defeat the security measures, they will return. We have had some success in B&E investigations and prosecutions, particularly with stolen firearms, resulting in charges. The offender was captured on video and known to us. And good evidence is, of course, important for us to be able to move forward with prosecutions like this. And I'm mindful that offenders don't generally commit these offenses while the police are present watching, but they wait for us to be busy with something else. And oftentimes we receive the report well after the fact, sometimes days later, with no evidence that we can move forward, and maybe weather is destroyed and not left us an opportunity for investigation. But I do agree that uniform presence will dissuade most offenders from their deeds. People don't generally do bad things when a police car is present. However, we can't have a police car or a uniform car in every area of concern to stand guard 24 hours a day. In Petroleum, we've been using focus patrols to address concerns brought to us by the county and by the town of Petrolia. Some examples in Petrolia specific were a focus patrol to tackle the property crimes in the town. We had a complaint in August to increase patrols in the area of Talyard Road and Glenview Road due to public concerns for speeders and traffic violators. It yielded 10 occurrences and 4 charges. I think that presence seems to have quelled the activity. We received no further complaints, and as such, we closed that focus patrol, but it can be reopened if further complaints are received. We also had a focus patrol set up in October for ongoing mischief throughout the town of Petrolia. And this was closed with the onset of winter with no new complaints being received. And I anticipate we might have to reinitiate that in the spring when nice weather comes. These initiatives are on our shift briefings, and they remind officers when they're not busy with calls for service to address these concerns. We talked about last time about some of the ways that we can quell the mischief and the youth crimes, and we certainly have focus patrols at our disposal, and we have crime prevention through environmental design that is offered to all of our victims, and it involves making sure we have good lighting, removing shrubs, etc. that might hamper a view of a building, and that is certainly available if you hear of anyone that is in need of that. So I looked at some calls for service and selected some specific occurrences that I can go over if you'd like to hear about some specific occurrences in Petrolia. And just got to make it bigger on my screen. So I looked at last year's calls for service, and on proactive traffic enforcement, 911 calls, traffic complaints, rides, impaired drivers, break-ins, mischief, motor vehicle collisions, and mental health act calls. And I looked at the dedicated hours for each quarter for the town of Petrolia, and we seem pretty consistent with a total of 13,624 hours over the year, 3,300 of those in quarter one, 3310, 3344 for quarter two, 3335 for quarter three, and then 3635 for quarter four, for a total of 13,624. Calls for service were fairly steady throughout the year, much like the hours that were committed. 726 calls for service in quarter one, 731 in quarter two, 755 in quarter three, and then 867 in quarter four. We've seen a decrease throughout the year in 911 hangups. That's something I think we talked about that was an unnecessary issue. Going from 7 to 8 to 4 to 3 as we go down from quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. Traffic complaints were up in quarter 4. They started at 19 in the beginning of the year and stayed pretty consistent until quarter 3 and quarter 4 when they went to 33 and 44. And rides, again, visible presence by our folks, a total of 42 for the year, and the highest was in quarter 4, obviously in the festive season, with 17 ride programs. I know that I believe the last time we talked about no impaired drivers in Petrolia, but we had 4 in quarter 2 and 2 in quarter 4. So we have seen a little bit of that activity, and we've seen, I hesitate to say not too many break-ins because any one is too many throughout the year, but each quarter we had 2 until you get to Q4, when we have 5. Mischief occurrences are staying in the 7 to 9 range throughout the quarters. So again, any one is too much, but it's not as many. And motor vehicle collisions, the highest point was 25 in Q4. Before that, we were ranging from 17 to 20. Mental Health Act calls are in the 20 to 25 range for each quarter. So they are taking some of our time, and I think some of that is related to mental health and to substance abuse, and it all ties into crime that you're seeing with mischief and with thefts. So those are the stats that I had for you. If you have any questions for me or anything that you'd specifically like to discuss, that's kind of what I have had prepared for you this evening.
Hey, thank you, Inspector Avery. Yeah, that's an awful lot of information to absorb, but during these, what I call difficult times for everyone in police, municipalities, this is just a very awkward time. But first of all, I want to just, we did introduce council, and I see Councillor Field is now with us. Welcome, Councillor Field. Do you want to raise your hand so they know who you are? Thank you.
Sorry about that. I had a little computer issue.
Well, we're glad you're here. Okay, I'll open it up right now. Is there any questions for Inspector here that you'd like to ask at this time? I think I was just going to ask you, were you going to leave some information with the clerk at all? Do you have like a report you can leave, or you just gave a verbal?
Well, I gave a verbal. If there's something that you'd like specifically, Mr. Mayor, I'd be glad to prepare something for you for a written submission. Yep. Yeah,
I think it's just a lot to absorb with council all at once to hear all that without, some time to look at it or see it. But if you could put some of the highlights down, I think I would appreciate it.
I certainly will. Yep.
Okay, thank you. Was Staff Sergeant, was he going to speak as well?
Do you have anything to add, Ross, to my thoughts?
Thank you, Inspector, and thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a couple of small areas for top up of things that I think might be of interest to the community as well as to council. Specifically in relation to vaccination clinics, I wanted to provide you with a little bit of an update as to what we're doing with regard to that, because I know that that's in the media quite often, and it can be sometimes quite a contentious issue. So as you're aware, the vaccination bus has been in the farmers market area on a number of occasions, including today, actually. Just to set everybody's mind at ease, our members are provided with all of our vaccination clinic locations on a weekly basis. And we do focus patrols, as the inspector spoke of earlier, specifically in relation to all of those vaccination clinics, including not only when the GoVax bus is at the farmers market, but also, for example, the health clinic in Petrolia as well. So we are alive to the potential concerns that have arisen as a result of COVID, and be assured that our members are actively engaged in ensuring that the safety of the health workers and members of the community is addressed. The other thing that I did want to touch on was in regards to commercial motor vehicle enforcement. I know that with the limitations for commercial trucks passing through Petrolia, at times this does become a concern. I just wanted to let council know that I meet with Matt DeLine from the county, who's in charge of county roads as well as enforcement, on a regular basis in regard to concerns that they have. Last week, as an example, I provided our West Region Traffic Enforcement Unit out of London with specific information with regard to areas for increased patrols and focused enforcement for our commercial vehicle inspectors. So that is ongoing on an ongoing basis. It's something that we take very seriously with those trucks passing through Petrolia if they're not supposed to be there. So I want to ensure that you're aware of that as well. The last thing I did want to touch on is in relation to impaired driving related offenses. When we do identify a point of origin or a place of consumption within any area, including Petrolia, of course, we engage our contacts at the AGCO to ensure that they're doing the proper inspections, follow up and enforcement with businesses that are serving liquor. So that is something that I review every impaired driving offense that we have to ensure that if it's something worthy of passing on to the AGCO, meaning outside of consumption in a private residence, then that's something that they are actively engaged in. And then without going into specifics about businesses specifically within Petrolia, I can tell you that the AGCO is actively engaged. So those are my comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody might have. And thank you.
Thank you. And before I open it up to council, I'm pleased to hear that as well. I think like I'm thrilled to have the bus here, but I am pleased to hear about there's some security or because I know that it is awkward between the vaccinated and unvaccinated. I am pleased about the trucks too. I do get complaints about trucks going through, and as council is aware, it was several years ago where the council did request the county to stop them coming in town unless it was a delivery. So I'm pleased that you're still keeping an eye on that as well. So thank you for that. All right, I'll open it up to council. Is there any questions that you may have for either Inspector Chris Avery again or Staff Sergeant Ross Stewart? I know it's a lot of information to absorb, but I'm really pleased to hear that. And I really appreciate you coming out to give us an update like this, because quite often we know you're there, but it's still nice to hear you give us an overview. We do see your reports in the minutes from your police service board meetings, as well as your every 2-month report. And when I looked at that, I thought we looked pretty good, because I'm thinking there's not as many people maybe traveling, but I do understand we've got more people home, and there are other issues, and certainly the drugs and everything else is a concern from all of us, and mental health as well. So again, last chance, council, anything you'd like to add or any questions? Okay, oh, yes, go ahead, Councillor Field.
Just a comment or a question for Inspector Avery. And maybe you went over this at the beginning, and I apologize if you did. I just wondered how the pandemic has affected your manpower and your staffing levels. Has that been a concern for you, or are you feeling good about where you're at with manpower?
Right now, I'm feeling pretty good about it. We're monitoring, and everyone is being really good and really careful about what they're doing, wearing PPE in the building at all times. And staffing has been good. We're having, generally we're having 1 or 2 people that might be off at a time. We did have an issue where several people, 5 or 6 were off at once, but that was a while ago. It's been about a month, and we had our neighbors were good enough to help us out, and they had the same sort of an issue, and we helped them out. And touch wood, right now, our staffing is well. We've got a couple people that are sick, but we're being mindful to keep them out of the workplace. And we're keeping the front doors open, but I'm watching the admin staff. We have them cycling through so that they're not all here at one time. So if somebody gets it, we're still going to have staff to keep the doors open that way. But front line is fully staffed, and will continue to be so.
Yeah, go ahead, Councillor Field.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's good news. And I knocked on wood in between. So
thank you.
I just want to thank you guys for what you do, for the support you give to us. I know it's a thankless job sometimes, and it's the first blame for somebody. The OPP aren't here, but I think you're doing a good job, and you're out there. So I just appreciate the support that you give to us. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, the mayor was correct when he mentioned this is strange times of vaccinated, non-vaccinated, and everyone having so many different opinions and experiences. And yeah, we're working and keeping the peace. And so far, I think we're doing okay. I'm glad to hear it looks okay from your side. Thank you.
And just one other comment, I'm pleased to hear about the mental health and having help there, so you're not spending hours at a time. I think Mr. Charlebois and I were both there in Sarnia when they announced the additional money to help, so you didn't have to spend so much time with them and they could deal with it much faster. Anyway, that's great. I certainly appreciate what you do as well, and I want to thank you for coming. We really appreciate you doing what you're doing. And you're right, this is difficult times on everyone, even counselors. It's a difficult time. People maybe aren't as sympathetic as they usually are. I think everyone's on edge, which makes it awkward. But I'd like to thank you for coming to address council. I wish you the best. And for the other council members, we will be meeting at 7 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you. Stay healthy.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.